Shalom Uvracha. I'm pleased to invite you to the Shiur on Haggadah Shel Pesach, dealing today with the four Banim, the four sons. The four sons are very, very interesting Midrash. They got a lot of attention, and I'm happy to present you here, hopefully, a few new insights to this fascinating topic. As discussed earlier, for this set of series on the Haggadah, I would like to share with you very authentic insights from Moshe Rabbeinu, David HaMelech, Tanaim and Amoraim, teachers of the Mishnah and Gemara, and present it in a systematic manner, historically, following the Mishnah, who says, start with 5 years to teach the child Tanakh, Bible, with 10 years Mishnah, and with 15 years the Talmud. So we have to follow a historical development of the sources in a systematic way in order to get a good understanding. That's what we did in our shiurim. Everything is online on tfilah.org, and I'm more than happy to get feedback, suggestions for improvement by my email below. So we spoke about different topics about the Bible, the sources in the Bible, in the Haggadah. I would like now to address the source, the topic of the four sons in the Haggadah based on the sources in the Bible. Of course, what we know in the Mishnah actually doesn't mention it. The Mishnah says we have to teach the child lefi dato shel ben aviv melamdo. We have to teach the child according to the personality and the knowledge of the child. So the Gemara, the Yerushalmi says, you have to be aware there are different children, and for each child we have to know how to teach him properly. The Yerushalmi has a full text on these Arba Banim, what we have in the Haggadah, with some differences, which we'll talk about. And of course, the Mechilta, another Midrash, talks about the four Banim, which is the source for the Haggadah. So to summarize, the four Arba Banim, the four sons, the Midrash is connected both to the Bible, because the Psukim are from there, and both to the Midrash, so it covers 3 different time periods. To address now in more details the Midrash of the Arba Banim, one may ask the question, a lot of questions about this Midrash, and there are wonderful explanations, and I would like to ask a very, very simple question. What was in mind of the oldest author on this Midrash? The oldest author on the Midrash is not the Midrash, it is Moshe Rabbeinu. Because the Midrash uses psukim from the Torah, Torah Moshe, and presents them in a special way, the way the Midrash likes to do it. But I ask a question, which actually is not a question for the Midrash, how to understand the Midrash. I would like to ask another question. What did Moshe Rabbeinu had in mind when he spoke about 4 different children at different points in time of the Tanakh, Sefer Shmot? Sefer Shmot, the 3rd son is in Sefer Shmot, and the last son is in Sefer Dvarim. So I would like for a moment to forget about the Midrash, take only the Psukim, and ask Moshe Rabbeinu, tell us Moshe Rabbeinu, what did you have in mind when you spoke about the next generation, the children who ask questions? So I will move away now to a shiur in the Torah. It's not the shiur in the Midrash, not the shiur in the Haggadah. We go backwards to the source and ask the biblical sources, what's the meaning of the biblical sources independently of the Midrash? I published that a few years ago, and I think there is something very, very interesting to learn from the Psukim, looking at them as a shiur in the Torah. And it's not only a shiur in the biblical text, it is a shiur in the mind, in the teaching, and in the belief system of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe got the Torah from Har Sinai and taught it to the Jewish people. Moshe knew how to teach. He is the messenger. Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. He knew how to bring it from Sinai to the Jewish people. So now let's focus for a few minutes. How did Moshe teach? For that purpose, I will not use the term of Chacham Rasha, Tam v'sheino yada lish'ol, because the Torah doesn't call them like that. I call them the 1st son, the 2nd son, the 3rd, and the 4th son. And we will find very interesting insights looking at the biblical sources. How did Moshe teach the young generation? We have the first son, which is in Egypt. Before the Jewish people left Egypt, it says that Moshe said, "V'haya ki tavo el haaretz asher Hashem yiten Hashem lachem kasher diber, ushmartem et ha'avodah hazot." In Egypt, Moshe says to the Jewish people, you should know, you should continue this mitzvah afterwards. This mitzvah is not called a mitzvah, it's called the avodah. It's called work. He is in Egypt, and he talks in Egypt, the place of slavery. He talks to Bnei Israel who are slaves. It is a avodah, not in a respectful way. He calls it mitzvah, chokim, mishpatim. It's a slavery, it's work. And the children very naturally will ask, oh, you ask us to do a work, a job. Why should we do that? It's avodah. You just called it avodah. Nothing wrong that the son replies, why should we work this work, do this work? ואמרתם זבח פסח הוא להשם אשר פסח על בתי בני ישראל במצרים ונופו את מצרים ואת בתינו הציל ויקוד העם וישתחו. So what do we tell him? You do this work, and you should remember what happened in Egypt when there was the plague, Makat Bechorot, and Hashem skipped the Jews' homes and saved them in their home. The question is a question which comes from Egypt. The terminology of the question is an avodah question for slaves, avodah, a job of slavery, and the answer is an explanation of the historical event which happened in Egypt, and in Egypt only. There was a miracle in Egypt. Very naturally, this question and answer is only related to Egypt. Furthermore, as Nechama Leibovich and others pointed out, it's actually not a question. There's no dialogue the child asks and the father explains. No, the child says something and the father says something. On the child it says, "V'haya ki yomru, ve'amartem zevach pesach hu l'Hashem." Why is that there are no question and the answer, a dialogue, an open dialogue? Slaves in Egypt, everybody says what it says. They don't really listen to each other. They don't really interact. Everybody says what he has to say. It's not a question, as we see for the later sons, where it says, "V'haya ki ishalcha," and you give him an answer. That is the first son back in Egypt. The second son, right after they left, in Shmot Yud Bet, at the end of the chapter, it says, "Vayi be'etzam hayom hazeh hotzi Hashem et bnei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim al tzivotam." And there it says, you left, you should tell your son in the future, "V'higadat levincha bayom hahu le'emor ba'avur zeh asa Hashem li b'tzeiti mimitzrayim." That's the reason why Hashem did that for me when I left Egypt. It's a very personal experience. You should tell your child what happened to you when you left, you individually, in a singular, when you left Egypt, what God did to you. It's not the time to talk to the child, to explain him, to have a lot of explanations and discussions and the ceremony and the meaning. At the time you leave Egypt, you just run. You better don't waste time for a lot of explanations, because the Mitzrim are running after you. You are in a life-threatening situation. You better take advantage now to get away of Egypt. Don't talk, just run. It's your decision and you run. But right afterwards, Moshe says, oh, these days, this event of Yetziat Mitzrayim is a historical event. It will go to the history. It will go to the history of the Jewish people. Remember, Moshe says, once in the future, your child will ask, what happened now is not a routine, is not something that happens on a daily basis. It is a very, very special historical event. And Moshe says right away, some 6 psukim later, "V'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar lemor." Once your son will ask you a question tomorrow, "Ma'azot," what's that? Pay attention. This son uses a modified question compared to the first son. The first son in Egypt says, "Ma ha'avodah hazot lachem." He called it avodah, not very respectfully, but we explained the context. Lachem, not for him. So the third son, the second son didn't ask altogether because they're just leaving Egypt. Don't talk, just run. The third son uses the terminology, the question of the first son, but he deletes 50%. From the 4 words, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem, he just says, ma zot, without avodah. He doesn't call it slavery job. It's just something. He doesn't know what it is. It's not for you. It's for him as well. Zot. He doesn't go into the details. So what do we answer him? God took it out of Egypt with a strong hand. והיה כי יקשה פרעה לשלחנו, ויהרוג השם כל בכור בארץ מצרים, מבכור אדם ועד בכור בהמה. על כן אני זובח להשם כל פת הרחם הזכרים, וכל בכור בני אפתה. We, Hashem, took us out of Egypt. And there was something happened there, not only at the exodus of Egypt, it happened beforehand. Moshe told Paro was stubborn, and he didn't want to leave us. So there was a terrible makah. Vayarog Hashem kol bechor, but he saved us and took it out. And therefore, we celebrate the mitzvah of Pet Rechem, Bechor Pet Rechem, and we celebrate the tefillin. Vaya laot al yadcha uletoltafot bein enecha ki bechozek yad utzianu Hashem mimitzrayim. Keep the Torah in your hand, because with a strong hand Hashem left us out of Egypt. To tell us the strong hand of Hashem should continue to have an impact on our life in the future on a daily basis. The tefillin is on my strong hand, should remember me what is the strong hand from Hashem, stay connected to Hashem. So it's not only the event at the moment of the event, and we were just running, it's a first educational experience of the child, which he should, an educational experience which he should take with him for the future with 2 mitzvot, Pet Rechem and the mitzvah of tefillin. That is in Sefer Shmot. 40 years later, when Bnei Israel was, after all the time of the generation in the desert, 40 years, it says in Sefer Dvarim, after the first parasha of Kriyat Shema there, after Aseret HaDvarim, which are repeated there, it says in Sefer Dvarim the following, Ki yishalcha bincha machar le'emor. It's exactly the same wording in the 4th son, which we had for the 3rd son. V'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar le'emor ma v'chule. It says here, Ki yishalcha bincha machar le'emor ma. But he knows now how to phrase the question. He finds the right wording. Ma, not mazot. He learned for 40 years the Torah. He was at Har Sinai, or he knows that his parents were at Har Sinai. So he has a very, very detailed question of Ma ha'idot v'achukim v'hamishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu etchem. You were told about these mitzvot during the 40 years. I was not yet born. ואמרת לבנך עבדים היינו לפרעה במצרים ויוציאנו השם ממצרים ביד חזקה. And you tell him the whole story. What happened in Egypt? What was our condition as slaves? We suffered terribly, but Hashem made a lot of miracles to save us. ויתן השם אותות ומופתים גדולים ורעים במצרים, בפרעה ובכל ביתו לעינינו. In front of us, he punished the Egyptians. ואותנו הוציא משם. He saved us. What for? Not just to leave Egypt. He saved us. ואותנו הוציא משם. למען הביא אותנו לתת לנו את הארץ אשר נשבע לאבותינו. He took us out of Egypt because we have to go a long journey from Egypt to Eretz Yisrael, to the land which he promised to our fathers. ויצווינו השם לעשות את כל החוקים האלה ליראה את השם אלוקינו, לטוב לנו כל הימים לחיותינו כהיום הזה. God gave us all the mitzvot. Whatever we learned during 40 years in the desert is all the teaching for our future. צדקה תהיה לנו, כי נשמור לעשות את כל המצווה הזאת, ולפני השם אלוקינו, כאשר ציוונו. And it ends with אלוקינו as a mitzvah for everything in Eretz Yisrael. So the question is a much more detailed question of Eidot Chukim Mishpatim. It again is the same question which the generation in Egypt asked, and the generation afterwards, but it is modified for each generation now as a Shelat Chacham with much more detail. And the topic, the message, the take-home message of the answer is, it is the condition we had in Egypt, it is the miracle Hashem did, it is the purpose he took us out of Egypt in order to come to Eretz Yisrael and to fulfill all the mitzvot. So we see here a wonderful growth, a spiritual growth of the generation. In Egypt, very difficult to motivate the child. It's all avodah, it's not for him. At the time of the exodus of Egypt, run. Afterwards, yes, some take-home message, but not really too much. Two mitzvot of Petarechem and of Tfilin. After 40 years, a very detailed questions, a very, very detailed answers, and a very comprehensive message that was the purpose of the Yetziat Mitzrayim, to bring us to Eretz Yisrael, to fulfill there all the mitzvot. We see a wonderful growth of the generation. And we summarize that Moshe Rabbeinu, who brought us the Torah, before we learn what he brought in the Torah and what the teaching is, he knew exactly how to teach and who he is talking to. At the beginning, you talk to a child in slavery, keep it short. You talk afterwards to a child who is running, don't even talk to him, let him just run. And afterwards, memorize, make sure that he will remember these days, but only 40 years later, he will grow gradually. And once he gets to the point at the end, you will give him the full picture. Moshe knew how to educate the child, not only geographically taking him out from Egypt, but and to Eretz Yisrael, also mentally. He knew how to raise a child and to lead him from the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim till he came to Eretz Yisrael. I tried to summarize that here in a graphic summary. And we see here that at the beginning in Egypt, and now I use, of course, the terms which we are so familiar with from the Haggadah. In Egypt, the child was Ke'ilu, a Rasha. He was not a bad boy. He was just in slavery. At the time of crossing the Yetziat Mitzrayim, it's not that he doesn't know to ask. It's just not the point and not the opportunity now to ask questions when you have to run without asking questions. In the desert, Am Yisrael, there were Tam. They didn't really know too much details, but they were open to learn. It is only after 40 years before they came to Eretz Yisrael, and after having been at Har Sinai, the parents, that they are ready to enter Eretz Yisrael, and they are Chacham. So the 4 Banim in the Torah, according to a shiur in the Torah, nothing to do with the Midrash, according to the Pshat, these psukim from the Midrash, they teach us very clearly. Moshe knew how to educate the younger generation, to grow with the Torah, steigen in Yiddish. I had the privilege to present this interpretation to Rav Dr. Danny Tropper, and he told me a very, very nice story in the name of Rabbi Besdin, which he heard in the 50s, I guess, when he was studying in New York. And Rav Besdin said that these 4 generations of the Midrash, they remind the 4 different types and generations of people who came from Eastern Europe to America in the beginning of the 20th century. The first son remembers the learning in the yeshiva, and for him it was, the whole mitzvah had a lot of meaning of edot, chukim, umishpatim, like the chacham. The second generation who came to America and was assimilated and rebellious against the parents, they were like, Mahavodah zot lachem, who needs that in our modern world? Afterwards, there was a Tam, the next generation, which still remembered the grandfather who is doing the Seder, and he has some memories, but it's not really connecting, and he asked a simple question of Mazot. Afterwards, the 4th generation, when the grandfather is not around anymore, the child even doesn't know to ask the question. So that's a beautiful explanation in the 20th century in the States, Jews coming from Eastern Europe there, which is a nice drush on the Arba'at HaBanim and their generation. The reason I bring it here is because this explanation shows the deterioration, the slippery slope of deterioration from learning on a high level in the previous generation, it goes down gradually further down. I bring that just to explain what I think that the Torah wants to teach us of the 4 sons in the Torah. Moshe does exactly the other direction. He starts with a child in Egypt who has a hard time to learn. Avodah. Ma ha'avodah zot lachem. Afterwards, he takes him out of Egypt and he teaches him in the desert. And after 40 years, he trained him and he brought him to a level that he can ask, not going down the slippery slope, going up, growing from Egypt to Eretz Yisrael. That is the beautiful message of Moshe Rabbeinu via Torah. Let me compare that to a beautiful, beautiful letter analysis by Rav Kook. It's called Ma'amar Hador, when he analyzes his generation in the early 20th century. And he talks about the features, the quality, the challenges, and the problems of his generation. He talks about what are the children, which questions are they asking. That is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu actually does at different stages of Yetziat Mitzrayim. In Egypt, at the time of the exit, shortly afterwards, and 40 years later, he addresses the children and says, look where we are now, look where you come, look where you're going through, and look how you are growing, how you're thriving. That is, I think, a beautiful insight to the Arba'at HaBanim according to the Tanakh. And I want to close now this discussion and ask the next question. I want now to look at the Midrash, the way it is presented in the Haggadah. And that is a totally different music. It's a totally different message. And we look here on the right side, the 4 children, in a totally different order than what we saw in the Torah. We have the Chacham, Rasha, Tam, V'Sheino Yodeh Lish'ol. And the Midrash, of course, doesn't care about the Psukim. The Midrash has its own world and his own message. When the Midrash talks about the Arba Banim, it says, K'nagat Arba'a Banim Dibra Torah, Echad Chacham, Echad Rasha, V'Echad Tam, V'Echad Sheino Yodeh Lish'ol. And there are special features of these children. I want to focus on 2 questions which will help us to understand the historical background when the Midrash was created. Because there is a major, major question to the Midrash. Whatever we explain, any details and how he explains the Pasuk, there is one basic question. We do not find in the history of Jewish education that a child who doesn't know how to ask properly, that he is criticized and that we break his teeth. That's not the Jewish way to educate. Any child has questions, and we have to explain and educate the child and bring him to a better place. We have not the right to break his teeth if he asks a wrong question. We should explain him how he should ask properly. So this Midrash obviously has a very, very special agenda by telling the Rasha, oh, lefi she'hotzi et atzmo min haklal kafar ba'ikar, therefore you are out. As we said before, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem, lachem velo lo, the Torah says it, but the Torah doesn't say, oh, for such a question, you have to break his teeth. For such a question, the Torah says, you educate him, you explain him what the mitzvah is. Please remember it. So the change in the attitude that we have to break his teeth in the Midrash is totally changed. Why does that happen in the Midrash? What was the context of the historical, the social context, the cultural context, that Chachamim said, if a child asks the wrong question, we just kick him out. We just break his teeth. The answer comes from the Yerushalmi. If we look here in the Yerushalmi, we see the same question, more or less, and the answer says, Af ata emor lo, ba'avur ze asa Hashem li asa, le'oto ha'ish lo asa. For this human being, Hashem wouldn't have done it. Ilu haya oto ha'ish b'Mitzrayim, would that person have been in Mitzrayim, lo haya ra'ui lehigael misham la'olam. He would never ever had been the zchut, the privileged, that Hashem should redeem him from Egypt, should liberate him. Who is Oto Ha'ish? Oto ha'ish is, of course, in the rabbinic literature, a term for Christianity, for Jesus. Jesus is called Oto ha'ish in many, many sources. In the Yerushalmi, an Eretz Yisrael source, we learn now what is actually the encounter, what is the dilemma, what's the conflict of this Midrash. There are Chachamim who learn Torah, and there are Reshaim who want to be rebellious and move out of the Jewish community. These mitzvot is all stuff that's for you, not for us. So that is a very, very clear hint or a very clear explanation that the Midrash is dealing with different parts of Jewish society. The learned ones, the Chachamim, and you teach him everything. The Chacham, we teach him according to our Gilsa, Afatay ptachlo beilchot Pesach, Afatay morlo beilchot Pesach. Teach him ilchot Pesach, ein maftirim achar Pesach afikuman. That is the very last Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim. You teach him everything ad ein maftirim achar Pesach afikuman till the very, very last Mishnah. You just give him a very comprehensive education. Ad ein maftirim achar Pesach afikuman. That's the Mishnah in Masechet Pesachim at the very end. That's the Chacham. But the Rasha, who doesn't want to respect the Torah, who is it? It's this person who wants to get out of the Jewish society, and he says, Lachem velo lo. That's the early Christian. These are the early Christian circles who wanted to change the Torah to a new meaning. And of course, the Seder night is the night of the Last Supper. We discussed that when we spoke about Rabban Gamliel in another shiur, that is a very strong confrontation with Christianity. This very evening of the Seder is actually the evening when Jesus had his Last Supper, and his death is, according to Christianity, explained that he is the Korban Pesach, and they didn't break his bones because it says ve'etzem lo tishbaru bo. So the Yerushalmi, with the term Oto ha'ish, explains very well what we are talking about. Harav Dr. Menachem Katz from Efrat gave me a very, very interesting explanation of Hakeh et Shinav. Why do we break his teeth? The term to break the teeth, and very often the Midrash uses a term which is somehow connected to an earlier source in the Bible and gives an interpretation on this biblical source. Lehakot shinaim, to break the teeth, appears in the Bible only twice. In Yirmiyahu, and based on Yirmiyahu also in a parallel pasuk in Yechezkel. Let's take a look about Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu lived at the end of Beit Rishon, the first temple period, and he said, after the exile, you will come back, there will be a nechama, and then Hashem will love you and will create a new brit, a new covenant with you. Bayamim hahem lo yomru ot avot achlu boser v'shinei reshaim tikhena. Ki im ish be'avono yamut kol adam ha'ochel boser tikhena shinav. These days there will be no punishment for the children. They will not be. Nobody will break their teeth for the mistakes which the parent did. The Galut is a time when the Jewish people was in the exile in the Galut, and they suffered for the mistakes of their parents. That is, their teeth were broken. Yirmiyahu promises, Hinei yamim ba'im no'um Hashem, v'charati et Beit Yisrael ve'et Beit Yehuda brit chadasha. I will close with them a new covenant. Brit chadasha is the rebuild, is the restoration of the Jewish people after they return to Eretz Yisrael. It will start a new time, a new generation, a new chapter in Jewish history after coming back from Egypt. That's the meaning, after coming back from Bavel, sorry. That is the meaning of this pasuk. There will be a new period starting with the Shivat Tzion. This pasuk, as we know very, very well from the New Testament, is explained as a promise for the New Testament, because the translation into Latin of Brit Chadasha is Novum Testamentum, a new covenant. That is, according to the Christians, that is Christianity. So the New Testament, according to the Christian teaching, is the proof that the Christians continue the Jewish tradition. They are now the chosen people, not the Jews anymore. And all those, according to Christian tradition, who do not accept that, they should suffer and they should be killed because they don't accept the New Testament. That is the Christian explanation. Since that is the Christian explanation, the Midrash says, if anybody says that Oto Ha'ish is the teaching, as we learn in the Yerushalmi, we got a very clear message. This guy, you better break his teeth. Hakayat Shinav. Why Hakayat Shinav? Because that is the punishment in Yirmiyahu for those who are not respectful to the real Brit, to the Brit, to Am Yisrael. That is a beautiful, very strong, and a convincing insight that the Midrash is actually dealing with their social, cultural, and situation at the time after the Churban, at the time when the young religion, the Christianity, came up and was a danger for the Jewish people, as we know from Birkat HaMalshinim and other sources. So I trust we got here a very, very interesting insight by learning from the Yerushalmi. Now we want to move ahead to another interesting question, which arises when we compare the Yerushalmi to our text in the Haggadah, which is very similar to the Mechilta. We see here that the Haggadah and Mechilta are almost the same, why there is a difference between the Yerushalmi. And there are actually two major differences. The first difference is that the Midrash in the Yerushalmi is, the author of this Midrash is Rabbi Chia. Tane Rabbi Chia k'neged arba'a banim dibra Torah. The Mechilta in our Haggadah doesn't say that there is a special author of these explanations of this Midrash. K'neged arba'a banim dibra Torah. There is no name at the beginning to state who is the author of this Mishnah, of this Midrash. If it is Rabbi Chia, the Haggadah and the Mechilta should mention it. If it is not him, according to the Mechilta, why all of a sudden is Rabbi Ishmael taking authorship on this Midrash? It's not his. According to the Mechilta, it was a general common teaching from many rabbis, not him personally. So that is, let's call that a formal question, which is not that easy, but is not yet the big killer. The next question is a big killer, I think. The question, the answer for the Chacham in the Haggadah and in the Mechilta is the answer which the Yerushalmi gives to the Tam. And the answer which our Midrash in the Mechilta and the Haggadah gives to the Tam is the question which is given to the Chacham. As I showed you with these arrows, there is like a crossover of these questions and answers to the Chacham and Tipesh. It seems, I say that in a little bit aggressive way, it seems that the Yerushalmi got very confused what you have to tell to the Chacham, to your son the Chacham, and your son to the Tam. You mix up the questions. That is not a mistake that should happen. And this question is a very tough one, I believe. Big scholars were dealing with these differences in the Yerushalmi, including Professor Lieberman, Harav Shaul Lieberman, Professor Ephraim Elimelech Urbach, Dr. Daniel Goldschmidt, big scholars, and they came up with big questions and some explanations which I did not understand, for sure not find an explanation which explains this very, very surprising confusion of these two sons. The main message is that for every son, you have to teach the proper question. You have to give and teach him in the proper way. If you mix it up, what's the Midrash all about? What's the message? If you don't know how to teach to which son, so what does the Midrash, what's the overall message? That's a very difficult question. They said that there was another source, and there are different approaches. I did not understand their explanation. And now, since I have an explanation, I can say they didn't understand because I found something extremely, extremely interesting. In my humble opinion, it is the truth, which will also explain us why Rabbi Chia, who made this change intentionally, why he says, I take responsibility for this explanation. We do have another explanation. You ask the Chacham, you teach the Chacham. The Torah says, the Tam will ask, Mazot, and the same Pasuk will say, V'amart alav. Rabbi Chia says, no, I switched the roles. I have a special reason. I have a pedagogical attitude that I want to consider the Chacham a little bit a Tam. And I want to see the Tam a little bit as a Chacham. And he switches their role. Why? And for that, we have to understand the personality of Rabbi Chia. Now we go back to a shiur, a few minutes to learn about Rabbi Chia, who was this wonderful Talmudic figure. He was a student and a friend of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. He came from Chutz La'aretz, from Bavel. He lived in Tveria. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi had great respect to him. He called him Eretz Merchak Ish Atzati, that Rabbi Chia is actually a very big supporter of him and a consultant, a friend. And Rabbi Chia tells us a very, very special teaching. In the Gemara Masechet Baba Metzia, I brought here also the English translation. There is a fascinating, beautiful story about Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the most famous figure in his generation, the author of the Mishnah, his student and his friend, Rabbi Chia, how do they relate? How do they compare? And it says that one of the Chachamim Reish Lakish, when he arrived to the cave of Rabbi Chia, he had a great respect. And he says, wow, here, Rabbi Chia, here is the cave, the Matzeva, of a most special Talmudic scholar. Why? A divine voice emerged and said to him, Yatsa bat kol ve'amra lo, Torah kemoto pilpalta, Torah kemoto lo ribatzta. Even you, Reish Lakish, are a famous scholar. You did analyze the Torah like him, but you did not disseminate the Torah like him. Rabbi Chia was an unbelievable teacher. And Reish Lakish had to realize that this Rabbi Chia is much bigger than him when it comes in terms of to teach the Torah. What was his secret? What did he do? So the Gemara tells the following story. I will keep it short here. You have the text, and it's worthwhile to read this beautiful, beautiful text. Rabbi Chia elaborates. He said, what do I do to this end, to teach Torah? I go and sow flax seeds and twine the nets with the flax, and then I hunt deers, and feed their meat to orphans. So he works for children in need. An orphan who doesn't have parents and probably nothing to eat, he brings him the best meat. And he takes from these deers. Next, I prepare parchment from their hides, and I write the 5 books of the Torah on them. That's the way you are writing the Sifrei Kodesh. And afterwards, he has Sifrei Torah on a long line of efforts for these children, which he all did himself. Very dedicated teacher. I go to a city and teach 5 children the 5 books. 1 book per child, therefore he took 5. And I teach 6 other children the 6 orders of the Mishnah. He sits with every child, 5 children for Tanakh. Every child will be the owner of one Chumash. Every of the 6 children will be the owner of one Seder of the Mishnah. And now, all of a sudden, Rabbi Chia has no time. He did a lot beforehand. And now he says, I leave you alone. I taught every child his Chumash, 1 of 5. I taught every child of a group of 6 his Seder Mishnah. Now I leave you alone. And then I say to them, until I return and come here, read each other the Torah, and teach each other the Mishnah. What is he doing? He actually empowers the child and says, you were teaching with me, you're a child who has no formal education, you have even nothing to eat. I brought you food. So he believes in the children and believes in education of the future generation, even those children who have no opportunity to learn and to study in the Beit Midrash. He brings them a Beit Midrash. What is he giving them? Every child now is an owner of a Chumash. And every child is an owner of a Seder in the Mishnah. And every child has the obligation to teach each other. He is not only a student who had the privilege to learn from Rabbi Chia, he is now all of a sudden the young teacher who, by having studied with Rabbi Chia, is now the owner of a Chumash, the owner of a Mishnah, and he teaches others from a very, very young age. This is how I act to ensure that the Torah will not be forgotten by the Jewish people. That was his teaching. Rabbi Chia said, every child is capable to learn. Every child has the right to learn. I have an obligation to find every child, a poor child, a child without parents, a child who has nothing to eat. I have the obligation to teach him. That is Rabbi Chia. The Gemara notes afterwards that this is what Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, the big teacher of Rabbi Chia, the older friend, said, Kamagdolim ma'aseh Rabbi Chia. How great are the deeds of Rabbi Chia. So even Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi said, he is bigger than I am. That's the Torah. That is the educational message of Rabbi Chia. We have another wonderful story, which I would like to share with you. And this other story is in Masechet Moed Katan. In Masechet Moed Katan, we have a very interesting short story, which is a little bit difficult to understand if one missing point is not added. Shuv pa'am echad gazar Rabbi Akiva, gazar Rebbe, shelo yeshanu letalmidim bashuk. You have the Hebrew text. In order to make it more accessible, I have the translation. Here, two very, very good references. The oldest reference to that is by Wilhelm Bacher in German in the 19th century, a wonderful Jewish scholar who explained that the first time. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi decreed that students should not be taught in the marketplace, but only in a study hall. Shuv pam gaza achat, gaza Rebbe shelo yeshanu letalmidim bashuk. What was wrong? There is a way to teach children outside, big teaching, public teaching for every child, but Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he had another approach. He wanted to create students who are on a top level, on a perfect level, and he wanted to educate a small group of top students. Rabbi Chia, his student, did not agree. Yatzar Rabbi Chia against his teacher. Despite Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's decree, Rabbi Chia went out and taught his two nephews, Rav and Rabba Bar Chana, on the marketplace. And it's very interesting. It's not a question of the Beit Midrash and the marketplace. He was teaching them, go out with the Torah, outreach, be a Chabadnik, go wherever you can, and teach and teach and teach. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, he wanted to have a small, strong group inside. These nephews, as we know from Masechet Pesachim, were teaching also in Chutz La'aretz, in Bavel. When Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi heard what he had done, he became very, very angry with him. And there was a big fight, Ke'ilu Cherem. Rabbi Chia understood that Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi had taken the matter to heart and was insulted. So that was a major conflict between them. As much as they were friends, and Rabbi Chia, as a student, respected Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, there was a big, big tension between them. And the Gemara gives details. I make the story short and ask just what, and tell you just what the Gemara afterwards asked. Why did Rabbi Chia acted differently than his teacher, which is hard to understand, that he did not respect what the teacher told him, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was the most important teacher in his generation. So concerning the issue with which the entire incident had begun, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi asked Rabbi Chia, what's the reason that you, the master, acted as you did, ignoring my instructions not to teach Torah in the marketplace? Rabbi Chia said to him, it is written in Sefer Mishlei, HaChochmot b'chutz tarona. Wisdom cries aloud in the streets. Wisdom has to go outside. We have the obligation not only to sit inside, we need outreach, which implies that Torah should be publicized in the streets. That's the idea of Rabbi Chia. There is much more to say about Rabbi Chia, a fascinating scholar, a fascinating educator, and in the time when there was no money and no educational and no setup that every child could learn, he brought education to every Jewish child. And he was willing to do so and to contradict Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. And he was very angry, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, with him that he did it, but never mind. That is what Rabbi Chia believed in, that's what he did. After his death, Rabbi Chia died earlier, we learned in the Gemara in Baba Matzia that even Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said, nobody can compete with the accomplishment of Rabbi Chia. What Rabbi Chia fulfilled is Kama Torah hirbatzta, Kama Gdolim Maaseh Chia, that he was teaching Torah, Shelo tishachach Torah miYisrael. He understood that. In education, that is called a small classroom teaching. And Rav Yehuda Shaviv wrote a paper on this Midrash, the jigsaw puzzle classroom or the small group teaching technique. What this technique thinks is appropriate is that every child has the right to learn and has the capability to teach others. We can learn from every child if we teach every child individually. And what is the best proof for that? That every child can go out and teach others. Once I made it happen that the child understood enough and I strengthened his independence in learning, I develop his learning skills, I should also enhance and develop his teaching skills. We should teach everybody and we should be aware that every child can teach us. That is, I think, a wonderful insight in this wonderful Talmudic scholar, Rabbi Chia. Every child deserves to be taught. Every child has the capability to teach. Now let's come back to the Midrash in the Yerushalmi. And everything got totally clear, very, very meaningful, and a wonderful message for the Seder Arba'at HaBanim. Rabbi Chia knew exactly what the Midrash says in the Mechilta. He knew exactly what Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said, how you should teach. He did it differently. He believed in another approach. And with all the respect to Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, he taught everybody on the market. With all the respect to the Mechilta, Rabbi Chia said, no, I want to show that no child and no Talmid Chacham is allowed to keep his Torah for himself and to teach only all his life in the Beit Midrash. Even the Ben Chacham, even if we educate the child in the Beit Midrash, we have to show the child what is the answer which the Ben, who has no background, wants to hear. Teach the child of a Chacham how to talk to a child who is not a Chacham. Keep him open-minded. Make sure he doesn't lose the language to all parts of Jewish society. Even the Ben Chacham, and they can be the most famous rabbinical family and the biggest scholars, never ever lose the contact to those who ask simple questions, who are balabatim, who are from an assimilated background, who never taught. Rabbi Chia believes that the Talmidei Chachamim should never ever lose the language of Am Yisrael at large. And on the other side, he said to the Ben Tam, or Tipesh in the Yerushalmi, oh, you think you ask a stupid question? You think you are not a scholar? You think that you have no education at home because we live in a generation when there were orphans and there was no money and no system for educational system? Rabbi Chia says, no, every Jewish child has the right to teach, has the right to get educated, and has the capability to teach himself. So to the Ben Chacham, he says, what to the Ben Tipesh, he says, even if you ask very simple questions, I will show you. You can make a lot of progress, and you can be ready and deserve an answer of a Chacham. You will not stay forever on the level which is not a Ben Chacham. I can bring you to a higher level. That is the Chidush of Rabbi Chia. So by full intention, he took the Ben Chacham and the Ben Tipesh, and according to his pedagogical philosophy, he changed Chacham. As much as you are smart, never forget the simple answers. Tipesh, Tam, don't think that you don't ask good questions. I will show you that your simple questions will bring you to a level that you are a Chacham. That's exactly Rabbi Chia. Now we understand why he switched the answers. Since he switched the answers, and he made major changes, not small modifications, to the Yerushalmi, he made a major change to it. That is not the responsibility of the Midrash and the Mechilta. Now he took over and said his own opinion, his own educational opinion, you better put your name first, because otherwise people will think that is what it says in the Mechilta. It is not. It's the idea of the Mechilta, but with a major switch of the answer to the Chacham is the answer to the Tam, and the answer to the Tam is the answer to the Chacham. If we think that over, I think it's a wonderful insight in the Yerushalmi, the wonderful message by this Rabbi Chia. We need a lot of Rabbi Chia in our generation. And I had the honor, that was one of the last Divrei Torah, which I could share with Rav Amital, Morenu V'Rabbeinu Rav Yuda Amital, and he was very excited about this explanation, and it was very much his personality that every Talmid Chacham should never ever forget the simple language for Am Yisrael. And no child from Am Yisrael, as much as he comes from a assimilated background and had no education, he should never ever believe that he will not be able to learn what the Talmid Chacham is capable to learn. He can get there if you just educate them. Kama Gdolim Maaseh Rabbi Chia. I think that is a wonderful message for the Seder night. We should invite Rabbi Chia to every Seder and teach and learn how to talk in a simple language if we learned a lot. And if we did not learn a lot, we should believe that we can learn a lot if we just sit down and teach. So here I try to show you, to summarize this shiur, I try to show you a beautiful insight of the Arba'at HaBanim, both in the purely biblical context. I took out the 4 psukim from the Midrash back to Moshe Rabbeinu, and I think that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us a wonderful insight how he wants to raise children in every condition and bring them from Egypt to Eretz Yisrael both geographically and both educationally. He wants to raise children and bring them to a higher level. And the Midrash of the Arba'at HaBanim, we showed that it reflects at the end of after the Second Temple period, it reflects the tension with Christianity. La Rasha Hakeh Shinav, we would never say something like that if it would not be somebody out of the Jewish people who attacks and endangers, threatens to the future of the Jewish people. It's only the Torah Ish. And we showed why Rabbi Chia in the Midrash, according to the Yerushalmi, switched the opinion with a wonderful educational and social message. I hope you enjoyed that. Learning and everything is, as I told you, on the website. You have the material there, the presentations, you have the sources, and I will also put, you will find there also the 2 Hebrew publications which I have on this topic. Thank you very much for listening. Chag Sameach, and I wish you a lot of teaching, a lot of learning, and a lot of teaching, and a lot of simcha. Chag Sameach.